Hi, I'm still Louis Mangan, and this is episode 2 of the True Age of the Continents as determined by entropy. From general observation, we can see that the continents still fit. From closer observation, when the continents are put back together like puzzle pieces, there is a gap distance of land reduction that occurred over time that absorbed the perfect 2-fit distance that the continents used to have. Looking at the coastal reduction and ocean rise over the past 14,000 years, we saw a 110 to 113 meter ocean level rise. Using topographical maps, we could see a rate of land consumed of the perfect 2-fit distance over the 14,000 years, and then translated that distance on each continent per 100,000 year intervals. Using this entropy of land consumed to make it the perfect fit, we can see that the continents were split apart about 19,000 years ago from Pangaea. When we look at historical erosion figures that cause an ocean rise of 1.7 meters per 1,000 years, not counting ice melt, we see that the present still fitting form of the continents will no longer last another 100,000 years as fitting together, or another 2 million years as continents. If we consider just erosion rates on the land and continental lift together, ignoring the ocean rise and coastal reduction rates, the continents would be leveled to the oceans, including the Himalayas, in just 10 million years at present erosion rates and lifts. So, when and how did the present popular theory of the continent's age as being 270 to 300 million years old come into being? We'll have to go back to Bernard Palissy. Bernard, in the 1700s, looked out his window at the sky and the dirt and recalled the cement and rock foundations of structures from the past, and he saw that many were still in some form recognizable as being at one time a structure. So he postulated that the world is billions of years old. He then published this anti-entropy theory that the continents don't change shape and that the world is billions of years old. Mind you, there was no radioisotope dating at his time. Bernard's theory was pulled in whole from the gray matter between his ears, ignoring the laws of science. Bernard then started an anti-law of entropy movement called uniformitarianism. You can even hear the anti-law of entropy, nothing ever changes ring in the name. The movement and his highly enlightening writings are basically an anti-law of entropy statement that allows the continents to always retain their still-fitting shapes over an endless amount of time. Thus, the belief in an anti-entropy genie that restores the eroded rock back into the original fitting shapes. Then, in the 18th century, a follower of uniformitarianism, Charles Lyell, as a rich teenager, came to sightsee in the Americas and came up with an idea for the age of the continents. Again, while ignoring entropy dating, stating that the continents are hundreds of millions of years old. He also came up with the geological strata ages and names that are used today by uniformitarianism geologists and paleontologists. He did this for his friend Charles Darwin, so that his friend would have the ages and geological time frame he requested for his theory. Lyell then helped Darwin publish his books. Now, beyond the entropy erasing any skeletal remains on the continents, and the continents in a million years, polystrates also diffuse the uniformitarianism geological strata ages. These fossilized trees are called polystrates because they break through several geological timelines identified in the strata. These polystrates cover the strata of every continent. This fossilized tree is also within a coal vein. I've seen some in 2 coal veins. Most uniformitarian geologists estimate that the formation of the coal takes 300 million years to form according to their established geological timelines. Obviously, 300 million years of coal and a few 100,000 years of strata did not form while the trees stood there. Self-evidently, unless you're a uniformitarian geologist with blinders on, these polystrates had all the strata layers piled on them at the same time on the same day, and then these polystrates found around the world died in place. Lyell knew of polystrates, breaking several thousands of years of his invented strata timelines, yet for his friend's theory, he went ahead and made the ages and geological timelines ignore the truth. So why not use the radioisotopes to measure the age of the continents? The reason being is that the radioisotopes cannot see when the continents split, or do they? The entropy clock, like the ocean rise and coastal erosion, is found within hundreds of radioactive elements. Each different isotope decays at its own rate, called half-lives. These entropy decay rates are stated in terms of half-lives of the parent radioactive element. One half-life of a parent isotope is the amount of time required for one half of the original amount of the parent isotope to decay into its daughter element. Over the second half-life, one half of the then remaining parent isotopes decay to the stable child's elements, which leaves a quarter of the original parent quantity, and so on and so on. So you hope that the entropy rate of an atomic nuclei would provide us with the reliable clock that we're looking for in unaffected by normal forces way. But nature's forces are not clean laboratories and are continually interacting and reacting with everything around it. Changing temperatures, pressures, flows, interactions, and reactions are always changing the parent and child quantities of isotopes in the uncontrolled nature of this planet. Even though there are hundreds of isotopes, all with their own half-lives, there are only 3 isotopes that are commonly employed to date: primordial rock. Becquerel discovered the possibility of radioactivity entropy in 1896, and Boltwood in 1907 developed the radioisotope parent-child uranium to lead dating method. The parent's half-life was found to be around 4.5 billion years old. How? Did they use historical known instances where a sample of rock began new during an eruption to verify zero lead to make a valid baseline, or did they use the uniformitarian timelines of Lyell for the baseline? No historical validations were used. And if a person found a chunk of pure lead with no parent left, how old is the Earth? The method assumed that there was no such thing as elemental lead, and that all the lead found in the samples came from the parent uranium, high tech for 1907. They found a chunk of lead and said the Earth is older. So Ashton then discovered the potassium isotope in 1921, and others came up with potassium isotope parent-child decay ratio in 1935, and then in 1966 they came up with argon dating, which was better yet. Yet a whole stack of others notes that many other things biased these argon results. This argon method was employed and said to solve problems of sample biases, and the age of the planet and the continents was determined from this improved method. Yet again, the age of the continents and the Earth was increased. A geologist, Dr. Steve Austin, wondered if any of the radioisotope methods were biased or not, since they had not been validated with samples taken from known historical starts. So Dr. Austin collected recent volcanic rock from the 1986 eruptions of Mount St. Helens and sent them in for radioisotope dating. Because the entropy clock of the isotope at the new lava flow is just starting, so no children should be present at this 0 point. And so 0 should be very easy to read since there's no children, such as argon. He sent in 5 samples and did not tell them where he got them from or the strata level he attained them from. He was performing a blind, validating scientific study. The samples dated between 350,000 years old and 2.8 million years old. He discovered that the assumption that no argon was in the sample at the parent isotope's birth was wrong. This is the key for accurately setting half-lives of isotopes and validating anything. Validating it according to historically known data and not trying to make it fit into some uniformitarian strata lines. This is what scientists did when developing C14 or carbon dating. They used historically known samples to develop its half-lives. Upon seeing Austin's results, most of his colleagues dismissed his findings, but a few geologists teamed up and tested lava rocks from lava flows historically dated as occurring during the past 2,500 years. Using the rubidium-strontium radioisotope dating method instead of the potassium-argon that Austin used to see if there would be a better analysis on the age, and found that its isotopes of decay have been set on an average of 9,500% too slow, since it showed these recent eruptions as being between 1.6 million to 110,000 years old. Okay, so there's some obvious problems with radioisotope dating of rocks. And Lyell's geological timelines are not even a possible starting point. They should use historical validations. Also, the beginning ratio of a parent isotope and stable daughter is not known. So a start date is impossible to know. A constant decay rate cannot be validated. Whether it's linear, we don't know if it's linear or exponential, or if that changes over time. The leaching of additional or parent isotopes or daughter elements is a great possibility, and they assume that there is none. Even today, let alone in 1907, there's difficulty in measuring precise amounts of sample isotopes in a sample. Using 2 different radioisotope dating methods to determine the age usually has great discrepancies and cannot be used to validate each other. Also, only certain rocks can be dated, and none of the rocks encapsulating fossils can be dated. You see only indigenous rocks like granite, magma, muscovite, basalt have isotopes that can be used. Fossils are found in sedimentary rocks only. Like you saw with the layers piled on the polystrate trees, such as sandstone, limestone, or shale. And geologists age the fossilized trees and bones that by bracketing them within Lyell's geological time zones that are circle dated by radioisotopes using a piece of particle of sand, magma flows, or selected indigenous rocks from a nearby lava flow. So why do these uniformitarian geologists say that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old and these continents are 270 to 300 million years old? So when muscovite, a common mineral and crustal rocks, is heated to 740 to 860 degrees Celsius. Now keep in mind, the highest temperature for magma is 1300 degrees Celsius and the lowest is 600 degrees Celsius. Okay, so when muscovite is heated to 740 to 860 degrees Celsius, under high pressures for periods of 3 to 10.5 hours. And you got to think about this. Magma under the crust is under one of the greatest pressures known. So this muscovite under high temp, high pressure for just a short period of 3 to 10 hours, it absorbs significant quantities of argon, producing K-AR ages in that sample muscovite up to 5 billion years. Okay, and that was just formed 3 to 10 hours. Okay, that's 5 billion years false positive, false age. And the absorbed argon is indistinguishable from the radiogenic argon 40AR that they're looking for, the child from the potassium. So if uniformitarian geologists or paleontologists use radioisotopes, at least the ones for rocks, to age your home, okay, this is how they do it too. As if the dirt and rocks crusted around your home was the same age as the dirt they were planted in, then they would look for a piece of magma muscovite around it and date the home and the trees in it like the age of the rocks surrounding it. Studies show that argon 40 is moved from the mantle by magmas up into the Earth's crust. This leaves scientists with no way of knowing the true age of any 40AR argon in the argon or potassium argon samples. And now scientists are aware of these problems, and uranium lead dating they've thrown out, and they're looking at and they've recalibrated the AR40 aging techniques, but they didn't use historical known dates, but they put them to geological timelines, and the other ones they come up with, they recalibrate because they show so much younger than their timelines they've set up. They've recalibrated these techniques, which we just showed, can be off by 5 billion years. For example, these are scientists that notice this. At the Harvard University, Nazer and Fleschker examined that depending upon the calibration of the half-life of the isotopes used, the calculated ages of a given sample would be different by 60 times the amount. Okay, so tektites are produced when a meteor strikes the Earth. Okay, the heat from the impact glacifies or melts these rocks at impact and splatters them into the atmosphere. As these glass orbs fall back to Earth, they become superheated red-hot blobs. So their isotope clock are supposedly set at 0, and that's meaning there's no children elements in there. The assumption of the geologist is to ignore the argon in the atmosphere. Now in Australia, they have dated these tektites using the potassium argon and fission track methods, and their ages were found to be clustering around 700,000 years old. The problem was the layers and zones that the tektites had been found in, or been dug up from, had been previously dated by radiocarbon methods at 7 locales. The oldest dating found was at only 7,300 radiocarbon years, and 9 of the samples yielded a radiocarbon age of 5,700 years. Okay, so the geologist said 700,000 years, and the radiocarbon dating, instead of the argon potassium, it was hundreds of thousands of years different. Radioisotope carbon dating uses known historical references to set the half-life of the isotopes, and it is very accurate up to about 55,000 years. Yet archaeologists have dated bones, humans, and animals in digs at a few 100,000 years old, and geologists come around and date the site at being hundreds of thousands of years old using potassium argon or argon dating. And which do they accept? In the classroom and on TV, the commentator states the age of those people and the bones of those animals as being hundreds of thousands of years old, even though the carbon dating only goes to 55,000 years old. So if they're using the potassium argon, why? Okay, carbon dating can only be performed on dead biological bodies or pieces of biological bodies like cloth or wood from a ship or bones. You're saying, so if the continents and Pangaea are so young, why can't we carbon date the dinosaur skeletons? Not all paleontologists are uniformitarian. They have carbon dated dinosaur bones from various digs. So yes, they can have carbon dated, and they have carbon dated dinosaur fossils and eggs, which is not possible if they're older than 60,000 years old. And then you're thinking, you know, what about animals found within the geological strata? Don't they match where they're supposed to be in the geological time lines according to evolution? No, they don't. Outside of mass graveyards, it is very rare to find a fossilized vertebrate. So no geological timeline delineation exists for evolution. It's just a cookbook drawing for schools. It's not actual. Mass graveyards for dinosaurs are found around the world. The United States, Canada, China, and Africa. Africa is hosting the largest mass prehistoric graveyard. The African graveyard is estimated, okay, this is a true mass graveyard, is estimated at containing 800 billion skeletons within it. Within these graveyards are all kinds of mammals. You would recognize them. All kinds of birds, fish, and dinosaurs, with no delineation of geological or evolutionary time between them. They're all just piled on top of each other. So why would fish be buried with them? Think about it for a minute. You'll get there. Also, the paleontologists have been finding for the past couple decades dinosaur blood cells, soft tissues, collagen within the bones. These soft tissues cannot last within the bones for more than 100,000 years. You know, entropy won't allow it to happen. It would just become a rock. So skeptical colleagues are blocking and excluding these scientists and their findings using cuts of funds, ridicule, oppression, persecution, exclusion, firing those people, using bad-mouthing tactics when they publish their findings instead of performing a true blind scientific validation of their findings, like a true scientist. Here's a list of the carbon-dated dinosaurs' ages according to carbon dating. Of course, the uniformitarianism movement put the dinosaurs that go extinct 65 million years ago. Well, they say that this collagen and the cells in the blood vessels and are built or caused by bacteria, and that they're just dating old bacteria found within the remains. So a team of geneticists led by Dr. Mary Schweitzer and her team examined the DNA of the cells found in these dinosaurs, specifically a duck-billed dinosaur. They took the cells from collagen and bone and blood cells and other soft tissues and discovered they were nothing like the cells of bacteria. The geneticists found enough of the dinosaurs' cells, RNA, DNA, that was still packed that they could see that the duck-billed dinosaur had coding more like a bird than a bacteria. A cell's RNA DNA can only last in the ground at 45 degrees Fahrenheit until complete DNA disintegration, its entropy within a cell, for 22,000 years. Okay, so we know the mass extinction happened. These graveyards were formed less than 22,000 years ago. So, in conclusion, entropy aging of the continents is simple and validated using several methods. The entropy timeline using ocean rise due to erosion or coastal reduction rates dates the continents as being around 19,000 years old. And the present coastal reduction rates will take the present continents all the way down in a million years, showing that all of Pangaea since inception cannot be more than 500,000 years old. Remember, ocean and land erosion existed pre the continental split. An asteroid strike can account for the split and placement of the continents, as well as the extinction of the dinosaurs, which carbon dating puts at 20 to 40,000 years ago, and the entropy of the dinosaurs' DNA sets the time at the creation of the mass graveyards at around 20,000 years ago. And an extra bonus here. The coal formed around the polystrates, carbon dated at happening around 20,000 years ago. Polystrates show that the stratum was piled up all at once. Yep. True entropy dating all fits together like puzzle pieces, and entropy determines the age of it all. No matter how much money or number of famous people and large textbooks the uniformitarians create to form a norm that is not even logically possible. Yep, there's hundreds of billions thrown at creating and enforcing the uniformitarian delusion and our society's norms. So if you're into money, stay the course. Beware, though, that truth always comes out. And in the end, history does not look well on the deluded minds who stayed the course after knowing the truth. And the true definition of insanity is the presence of delusions. A delusion is a false belief, a lie, held with strong conviction despite superior evidence to the contrary.